you guys know that there's a temptation as a preacher when he hasn't come with the word quite yet to just come up with your own word. And that's something I've promised him I'm never going to do. And if he doesn't give me the word, then it means I don't bring the word, that week or forever, how long. He doesn't give it to me, And so I was praying and just questioning myself and questioning me hearing him and the whole 9 yards and my own faith. And when he brought the word, it's one of the most powerful messages he's ever given me. And it's the next step from the Mary issue. And, I couldn't have planned it that way, but it's the way that he worked it out. And so I'm really excited about it. I'm as excited about this message as I've ever been about any message in my entire life. And, I hope I can cram it all in here and we get the point of it. And you guys feel the real Thanksgiving of it. And remember, I'm going to keep probably going back to this, is at your word I will, because we talked about sitting and waiting on his word. And then now what happens when you actually hear that word and the relationship. And I just wanted to start this off by talking about the Bible, why it's so important to us, and the fact of really what it is. And I want you to think about the Bible as it's the atlas of life. And I'll give you a quick story to kind of make that make sense. When I was in my early 20s, I was playing in a band with my cousin, and we took off to Maine to record a CD. And on the way back, I fell asleep, and my cousin ended up getting us right. I woke up, and instead of being on the interstate, we were in downtown Bronx, New York City. And I was like, how did you get us here, man? And we actually, he's my cousin. We played football together. We grew up together. We graduated high school together. We're brothers. We had a little tiff. I was a little upset, man. Like, how are we ever going to get out of here? We're in trouble, buddy. And so that was before the time of all the, technology telling you where you're at. And I don't have any of that now. I didn't even know what the name of it is, but it was before that, and all we had was a map. And so I just opened up the map and tried to figure out where we were and how to get out of there. And we just looked at it step by step as we would go through this place and where we were at. And you guys have seen, like when you stop at a rest stop and you see this sign pointing, you are here. That's what the Bible is when you use it. And you give your heart to it, you let him speak to you, you really believe it. We're all in different places, in different cities, and some of us may be in the same place, and some words may be meaningful to us at different times, and he speaks different things. But when you get stuck in a place, the Bible is going to get you out. And it's going to get you out because it's living, and he's going to lead you step by step out of where you're at, and you're going to be able to see. And that's why certain scriptures may not mean something to you today when they will tomorrow, when you're in a different place, when you've gone through a different city, when you've seen that. So it's living, and you got to get in there, and you got to look at it, and you got to let it speak to you, because it is Jesus. And so I just wanted to start us with that this thing is living, and you're going to see this when we talk about these verses. And I'm sorry if I talk fast today. I got a lot I'm trying to get in, and I want you to write down these verses and go back and study them yourself. And we're going to start off with John 21. And John 21 is the third time that Jesus appears after his resurrection. He's coming back. And one of the things that stuck out to me when I was reading that before I got to John 21 was how ordinary that it really is. He doesn't come back in pomp and circumstance for all the world to see. That's going to be later. That's going to be when he comes back in the apocalypse and gathers us all. When he came back here, he just appeared to the disciples, and it was in their ordinary life. And see, that's what he's saying for us, is we're always waiting for this extraordinary thing, and he's working in the ordinary. And that's what I started seeing in here, is the ordinary is extraordinary. But when we wait for the extraordinary, we miss the beautifulness of the ordinary, and it's kind of like that statement that life is what happens when we're waiting for something else to happen, and it's life unfolds, and it's beautiful as it unfolds in the ordinary, and it doesn't have to be this big thing. And I think we're going to see that in these stories, that in the ordinary, it is a big thing because it is ordinary. And if you don't get that, I don't know what to do for you. But we'll just start reading here at John 21. And like I said, this is the third time that he's appeared to the disciples, and I'll read the whole thing, and we're going to connect it up with some other stuff. I got 4 main scriptures today. I'm really excited about it and what he's shown me in this. So we're just going to launch into it, and please write this down and go through it with me and read this and soak it up. It's John 21. It says, afterward, Jesus appeared again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, called Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and the 2 other disciples were together. So all the disciples are together hanging out. It says, I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them, and they said, well, we'll go with you. So that night they went out and they got in the boat. But that night they caught nothing. And that's just the first stopping point there. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever been fishing and just felt like you caught nothing? And now I know it's hunting season, and I know a lot of hunters out there. Have you ever hunted and not gotten anything? And you know how that feels when you've put in a lot of effort and gotten no result from it. So just hold that in your mind. They caught nothing, had been fishing all night. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples didn't realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. As soon as Simon Peter heard him say that it's the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped in the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from the shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals with fish on it and some bread. Now I want you to stop and take this in for a second. We had talked about Jesus, God coming in the form of Jesus, and that his flesh matters and that he was a person. Right here, we saw Jesus doing something that just humbles me to the core. God himself making a fire, getting it going, putting some fish and some bread on it, and making a meal for the disciples. See, this is a real Thanksgiving, what we have here. It's communion. And see, that's what it should be. Almost every meal that we take in, we should realize. And I'm going to tie that in when we get to Matthew 4:4, which is that man doesn't live on bread alone, but on every word out of the mouth of God. Okay, so he's building this fire. Jesus himself has made this fire. He's cooking some fish. He's got some bread. He's ready for the disciples. So Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you've caught. Simon Peter climbed aboard and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Now I want you to hold on to that, because in this other instance that I'm getting ready to show you of the same story at a different time, it's not the same story. It's a similar story at a different time. The net was torn. I think that this points out that this is after the Holy Spirit, that what couldn't hold before is now holding. It is said no one can snatch us out of his hand. And I believe that that's what this is, that the net wasn't torn. So Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. I mean, can you imagine that? God himself cooking a fire, making you breakfast. None of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. And, another thing that hit me out of this point is it said that Jesus came at just the right time. I thought about that. He could have chosen to come at a time when there was all this technology and all this stuff, and he could just, make a website and just do his thing. He didn't. He came at a time where he was cooking fish on coals. That's meaningful to me. I don't know if it is to you, but I think it's the humbleness. I think that we've gotten way away from human existence and what God created us to be, and a humble existence like Christ lived in it. So we got to walk as he walked, and I don't think that our culture is doing that. And I think that we'll see that for these guys to do what Jesus said to do, they had to go against world opinion. They had to go against their flesh. They had to go against their own self to throw that net out again. I mean, these guys had been fishing all night long, and they hadn't caught anything. And then Jesus says, we'll do it again. And that's the overcoming the world. He said, you've got to overcome the world if you're born of God. You got to walk like Jesus. You're going to have to overcome this worldly mindset, which says you're wasting your time. I mean, you're just wasting your time. We've already done this. Hunters, I'm going to ask you, if you spend 12 hours in the woods tomorrow and you don't get anything and you walk out and your wife or your friend or anyone says, say, go back out, what are you going to say? I know what I would want to say. I know what it's like to set out in the cold and try and get a deer and not get one. I do it every year, and sometimes the Lord gives me one, and sometimes He doesn't, but it's from His hand. And so I'd be pretty frustrated, and I'd like to think that at His word that I would, and that's kind of where we're at there, a little challenge. And so now we're going to look at another account of this, a different account. Different story. I don't want you to think it's the exact same story because that's what makes it so powerful. It's kind of like the Mary stuff that we talked about last week, is we see these different instances, but the same thing is occurring in the different instances, and that's what makes it powerful. And so I read that story, and it meant so much to me, and then I started thinking about the fact that wasn't there another story like this in the calling of Peter, and I just went back and looked at that, and it was amazing at what I saw when you put these two stories together. So this one here is going to be from Luke 5. And this is the calling of the first disciples. This is obviously before He died and was resurrected and came back. So this is the very beginning, and the story that I gave you was the end. So what we got is at Luke 5, it says, one day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, and that is the Sea of Galilee, with the people crowding around Him and listening to the word of God, He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by fishermen who were washing their nets. And He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, that's Simon Peter, and He asked him to put out a little from the shore. Then He sat down and He taught the people from the boat. This was the first time that He ran across Simon Peter. And when He had finished speaking, so he's preaching on the boat, and then when He gets done speaking, He starts talking to Peter, and He says, hey, man, put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch. And this is the part, hunters, where what if Jesus said you've been hunting all night or all day? Now go back out again, and you're going to get something. And that's what He does to Simon. And Simon answered, Master, we've worked hard all night, and we haven't caught anything. But because you say so, and the New King James Version says, and at your word. So, because you say so, at your word, I will let down the nets. And I just want to stop there and hang on to that, because I know that we've all felt like that, and I've felt like that this month, that, Master, I've worked hard all night, and I hadn't caught anything. But at your word, because you say so, because I believe in you, because I've heard your word, and I know that it's against human opinion, and it looks like this is a mistake, and it looks like I'm wasting my time, and it looks like it doesn't matter, because you said so, and I know that you said so, I'm going to do whatever you say. See, I want us to hang on to that, because many of us are willing to do God's work, but we're not willing to do God's will. I want you to hang on to that. Many of us are willing to do God's work, but we're not willing to do His will. And that's where we've got to be. That's the true Christian, is when we're willing to do His will, when it goes against the face of human tradition and the principles of this world and all that kind of stuff. And that's what we have to do, guys. And so that's where we're at with that. And so Simon says, let down the net, because you say so, I'll let down the nets. And it said, when they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came, and they filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees. And that reminded me of the stuff with Mary. She's at His knees. She's consumed with Him and what He's doing. And he said, go away from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man. For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so were James, John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. And then Jesus said to Simon, don't be afraid. From now on you'll catch men. So they pulled their boats up on the shore, left everything, and followed Him. That's what we're called to do as disciples, to leave everything when we hear His word and follow Him. That's what I'm saying to you guys. That's what I've been saying all along, is God has made you for a purpose, that no one else has that purpose. It said that he's called all of us, some to be teachers, preachers, and evangelists, those different callings. One of those callings is you. It's who you are. And he's got that for you. And pray that he reveal his will for your life today, and that you have the courage to follow him. Because when he reveals his will for your life, I'm telling you, almost every time that I've seen in the Bible, it's against worldly human opinion, and it's going to look like you're making a mistake. It looked like they were doing something foolish. I mean, Simon already had his nets packed up. He was done fishing. I mean, he didn't catch anything. And the Lord said, I know you've been working hard all night, but throw out the nets again and you're going to get a catch. And I realized it made it so much sweeter that he hadn't caught anything. If he would have even caught one fish, it wouldn't have meant so much when he caught so many. It was because he didn't catch any. And so then I started realizing that, and we've talked about this before, that life is not about the material. See, at this Thanksgiving, don't get hung up on the material. Be thankful for it. But what we have to realize is the material is only there to teach us the spiritual. See, you couldn't even explain these spiritual concepts without having this material stuff to use it to explain, which is why Jesus spoke in parables. It's why he gives these examples of material to teach us something about the spiritual. But see, what we end up doing in the flesh is we get hung up in the material. And then we never learn the lesson that he's trying to teach us, that we really think that it's about the material, and that's what Satan tries to get us hung up on, is that it's about what we can see, touch, taste, all this stuff. And he said faith is unseen. Who hopes for what he already has? You know, so this whole part of being a Christian is following this intangible, invisible Christ that is completely real. And that when you follow him, he's not invisible and he's not intangible, and you recognize him. And see, that was the whole first part of that story, is first they had to recognize that it was him. Then they had to hear his voice. Then they had to leave everything and follow him. And that's what we're called to do, and not get hung up on the material. And that's, excuse me, that's why I wanted to connect the Matthew 4:4 with that. Because, see, Jesus himself was tempted to just focus on the material and not look at the spiritual that was being taught through that thing. And Satan tried to tempt him that. If any of you guys have fasted for even one day, you know how appreciative you are when you have food the next day. Well, Jesus had been doing this 40 days, you know, and you can only imagine the temptation that would be, you know. And so he said, turn these stones into bread. And this was the amazing part of that all got connected, was he said, man doesn't live on bread alone. So he said, that's the part of don't worry about it. I know you need it. He said, not alone. I know you need it. But on every word out of the mouth of God. See, we actually live on his word, that his word is sustaining us. We don't look at it, but he's actually working right now to give you life. Because you have breath, that's a byproduct of his work. See, we don't look at that. We think, well, I just exist. No, he's sustaining you. If he wasn't sustaining you, you would drop dead right now. I mean, he's giving you life. It said in Acts that he gives us life and breath and everything else. So he's sustaining us. We're living on his word. And see, that's what we see in these two instances. And see, that's why it meant so much to Peter. He remembered his call. And then when Jesus came back and he did the same thing again. See, this first time, Peter says, man, we've worked hard all night and we hadn't caught anything. Look in the second instance. He doesn't argue with him. He's already learned that. He just said, man, I get this lesson. You know, I learned it the first time. You told me to throw out my net and I caught so many fish I couldn't hold them. You said do it. I'm not even questioning you this time. The net's out and they caught those fish. But remember, the net wasn't torn. See, in this first account, when it's the first call, he said when they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. See, that's our human strength. Our human strength before the Spirit comes fails us every time. We can't live in our own strength. And that net is going to tear. But after Jesus comes and he's resurrected and he's done his thing, that net's not going to tear because he's the one fishing. He's the one gathering them. He's the one calling them. See, we don't save anybody. Can't do that. All I can do is plant a seed, and then God's going to make that grow and flourish the way that he wants it to. See, my call is just to throw out seed, and then he's going to do with that. See, he's the one that does everything, and we give him praise for that and glory from that. And whatever we have today, we know that it's something that his hand has given us, so that's a real thanksgiving. So I want you guys to hold on to the fact that last month we were waiting on his word. Now it's when you actually hear his word, and I want you to start praying that he reveal his will for your life. And then when he does, that you hear it, and regardless of what it looks like to the world, that you throw out your net and you say, at your word, Lord, I will. At your word, I will. And that's what I want us to hold on to. This whole message is, at your word, I will. And remember, again, that many of us are willing to do his work, but not his will. See, that's the relationship. The Pharisees were willing to do his work. They tried to push his work on other people, but they weren't willing to believe that he was alive and connect with his will and let him flow through them as a living sacrifice, surrender in their own agenda to his agenda. And it's a hard thing. And I realize with reading that Paul thing about the war between the spirit and the flesh, if you're really doing Christianity right, you feel this war in you many times where almost you feel like you're just going to jump out of yourself, where you feel this war between God and Satan and the flesh and the spirit in you. And rejoice when you feel that, because that you're doing it. You're working out the goal of your salvation, and just turn that over to him. See, a lot of times we repress that and we never learn the lesson. And there's a lesson to be learned in everything material. Don't get this Thanksgiving, don't get focused like Martha did back in that other story we read, where she's so consumed with making the meal that she forgets why she's making it. Don't get so consumed in all the minutia this Thanksgiving and forget that you're doing these meals and you're sitting down to love each other. So many times these holidays turn into Christmas vacation. You know what I mean? And we don't even really enjoy getting together. And we just use it as a chance to kind of nickel and dime each other. And, we have the meal and then we drive away and we just talk stuff about each other. Let's not do that this Thanksgiving. Let's get real and let's just realize that he's given us this meal, that it's a gift. That whatever you're eating is a gift, and that he's given you that by him speaking the word. And that's what made me think of this Isaiah quote. And I love this, guys. If you get a hold of this, you're going to see what the true gospel is in this. And you're going to give your heart to him this season. And he's going to speak to you. He's going to reveal his will for your life. You're going to leave everything that the world is telling you to hold on to that's important, and you're going to follow him. And it's going to be different, and this is a daily thing. You could have done it yesterday and fail at it today, and that's the war, and that's why he died for you. And he's going to work all that out. He just wants you to come to him, and be genuine and real. See, that's what I saw in Jesus. He was real. He could have gone just like when Satan was tempting him to be an earthly king. He could have come back and rubbed it in everybody's faces that, look, I came back from the dead. He didn't, that's not his way. He's got a humble way. He said, blessed are those that don't see and believe. See, that's why he did all that. So you have to have faith to believe in him, and you have to believe in his humble way apart from the intricate world way that's completely different. And so I want you to now write down Isaiah 55. This is going to be 9 through 11. And I'll try and repeat these again at the close of it. He said, as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. See, we don't understand what he's doing. He's using the material to teach us something spiritual, but we can't really fathom what he's doing. As the rain and the snow come down from heaven, that may happen today. It's something that he's going to produce by his word. It's not a coincidence, guys. As the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return to it without watering the earth and making it bud and flourish, so that it yields seed for the sower and bread for the eater. Here's where it really takes off. So here is my word that goes out from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it. See, his very word is what makes everything happen. And that's why he's wanting us to come to him. Look, all throughout the Bible, we see this process of him negotiating with mankind. He negotiates with us. Can you believe that? That's the parable of the persistent widow. He cares about what we think, but he wants to see if we're really real about it and if we're going to persist in it or if it's just a fleeting flesh desire. See, he negotiates with us like a parent. I remember, think about this. Parents, you negotiate with your kid. I remember coming to my parents, hey, Jeremy wants me to come over to his house. Can I go over to Jeremy's house? Well, what are you going to do over at Jeremy's house? Who's going to be there? Well, I don't know if you should be there. And it's this negotiation process. When Jeremy's going to be, is his parents going to be there? Well, who's going to, all this. He wants to hear all that. He's going to negotiate with you. He's going to listen to your concerns. He's going to work out the best plan for your life, and then he's going to speak it into existence. See, those fish did not exist there that night. They couldn't catch them. They were doing their part, and it was in their human strength, and they were doing what they could do. I'm not saying that we're not called to fish. We are fish. But realize there's going to be nights where you don't catch anything. There's going to be times where you can't do it in your own strength. All the time. You're just waiting on his provision and him to speak the word. And you got to remember on this, you say, well, I don't even follow Christ. And you're saying what he's given me is a blessing? Yes. Said he reigns on the just and the unjust alike. He's blessing you whether or not you're following him or not. You don't follow him just to get a blessing, or that means that everybody that followed him would be doing it for the wrong reasons, not because they loved him. There's some people that have a whole lot that are not good people. There's a lot of people that have a little that are great people. See, remember, we said his ways aren't our ways. So we can't look at that. But what I'm telling you is everything that you have, whether you believe in Jesus Christ or not, came from him speaking the word and giving it to you. That's the truth of the gospel. His word accomplishes everything. Now, I'm not saying you haven't done your part. You've done your part. You fish. They wouldn't have caught those fish if they didn't do their part. But we don't get hung up on what our part is. See, that was Martha's problem. She kept getting hung up on her part, and she lost sight of the fact that he was going to do something through her that was greater than she was going to do on her own. And so that's the struggle, and that's what we're trying to do. And I just want us to hold on to that at your word I will. I want you to ask him today, what is your will for my individual life? And then sit his feet, wait on it. When he speaks it, say, Lord, at your word I will. And be real and authentic. See, that's what I see with Jesus. There's no formula. See, on all these ways that we want to make it like a formula. That's what the Pharisees did. So then they could rank and file who was better and who was not. That ain't the way it works in the kingdom. See, Jesus did it different every time. Sometime he healed by writing in the dust. Sometime he spoke a word. Sometime he spit and made mud and rubbed it in their eyes. Sometimes he would whisper. Sometimes he would touch them. See, we can't formalize him. He's living. He's active. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be following basic principles, but those aren't dead principles. They're living, and just think about the fact he came back and he made breakfast for them. To me, that was a real Thanksgiving. And I wanted to leave us with two things. First of all, remember last time when I said God has a name, and I've kind of been harping on that for a season, that God has a name, and his name is Jesus. That's the whole point of Christianity, that somehow we leave that out. And he said that even the demons believe that there's one God. They just refuse to call him the name of Jesus. Okay? And there's a cool story. You guys know about when he drives the demons into the pigs and the pigs jump over the cliff. And the guy, Legion, that the demons come out of, Jesus tells him, he says, go and tell all that God has done for you. And when you read that, the next line says, he went and told all that Jesus had done for him. Jesus says, go and tell all that God has done for you. And he went and told all that Jesus had done for him. He got it. See, the true Christian is the one that says, at your word I will. The true Christian is willing to do God's will and his work, but not to forsake his will for his work. So what we're trying to do, what it all comes down to is this. We're going to persevere in his word. We're going to go against world opinion, our flesh and ourself, and we're going to act on faith when we hear his word. We're going to act on hearing his word. We're going to follow against the human judgment, learn the lesson, and reap the reward. And we're going to have a real Thanksgiving with Christ when we do that. So thank you guys for listening. You know, I really appreciate you guys taking the time. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving, the best that you've ever had. And I want you to go back and read those things. It's John 21, Luke 5, Matthew 4:4, James 4:4, Isaiah 55, 10 through 11. That's John 21, Luke 5, Matthew 4:4, James 4:4, Isaiah 55. And just thank you, Jesus, for everything that you've given us, and just help us in our human frailty in all the ways that we mess up. And thank you for covering our sin with your blood, and for giving us everything at your word. And help us to leave the things we need to leave and follow you. And as I say that, it said left everything. So realize nothing's more important than following him.